Afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining Encore Palm Beach County for this month's special presentation. We're pleased today to have the cognitive coach, Dorene Bridgemond, sharing her expertise about how we can save our brain. So without further ado, Doreen, welcome. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for attending. I am a speech language pathologist and a certified brain health coach. I have spent my career working in the field of cognitive rehabilitation. So brain health is a big passion of mine, having worked with people whose lives have been changed literally in a second from either an injury, related to possibly a car accident or a fall, a stroke, some other kind of physical injury. I also work with people who have been diagnosed with ADHD. And basically, right, our lives are dependent on our brains. And so I have created my business to help support people manage their greatest asset, which is their brains. So today, in the words of Betty Friedan, aging is not lost youth, but a new stage of opportunity and strength. And I'm sure that many people are familiar with all of the neuroscience that is occurring now. Having been in the field for 35 years, I can honestly say a lot of what they are proving scientifically, we kind of knew working in the trenches 30 years ago. They would say the brain you have that you're born with is the brain that you have. When you're turned 30, things start to deteriorate. Once your brain can't regenerate, and yet we would see people who were in very serious accidents learn to walk again, talk again, return to work. So we knew that your brain is capable of a lot. It's now we're really learning just how capable it is. So just as a reminder, the information that I'm going to be talking about is educational. It's not meant for medical advice. So if you have any specific questions about your situation, please consult your medical provider. Okay, so we're going to talk about cognitive reserve. And basically, cognitive reserve is similar to financial reserves. It's what your brain will rely on if you have an injury or an illness or a prolonged period of stress. And when we get a little bit further in the presentation, we'll talk about what the impact of prolonged stress does to your brain. So cognitive reserve is built throughout your lifetime. And the best news is that you are never too old or too young to build it. So I'm turning 60 this year. I'm still very focused on building my cognitive reserve. Until there's an active disease process in your brain is capable of developing cognitive reserve. And so again, when people say, well, why do I need cognitive reserve? Well, because life happens. I've had 4 concussions in my lifetime. For people who are undergoing chemotherapy and may be experiencing brain fog, studies are showing that people with higher levels of cognitive reserve are less susceptible to the brain fog. So, we all go through life with some story, and you want your cognitive reserve to be built as high as possible in order to manage those ups and downs. So one of the questions that I comes to mind for me always is, well, if we can do something about it, why are people not so active about doing it? And the health belief model consists of 4 factors that will kind of spur people to action. So one is if their perception and belief about the seriousness of a health problem is not significant enough, I'm not going to worry about it. So I think we all know dementia and Alzheimer's, it's in the news all the time, it's very scary. But if you haven't had a family member or, a friend, close relative be diagnosed with it and really seen it, it's kind of easy to go, I don't have to worry about that. That's somebody else's problem. It also comes down to your susceptibility. So again, if you have a family member who's been diagnosed, you're going to pay closer attention and be asking those questions about what I can do to help prevent it. You also want to know what the benefits are. So, for years we thought, well, it's unavoidable. If you are born with that genetic predisposition, doesn't matter what you do, you're going to have that diagnosis. And again, science is showing that that's not necessarily true, that there are things that we can do that act as prevention. And then the barriers to doing it. So, if I said to you, well, you got to climb 10 flights of steps a day, you got to stand on your head for 3 minutes, you got to go to see this particular doctor, you got to take $600 worth of supplements. Those are barriers. And so people are going to be less likely to engage in the process because they feel the barriers are too high. The information I'm going to provide today is really to take away those barriers, because we're going to talk about everything that is doable within your daily life. As a licensed speech pathologist, I cannot recommend supplements, so it will be all food-based recommendations. Okay. All right, so how do we measure cognitive reserve? There are questionnaires that will look at education, work history, how you spend your free time, and it'll create a rating, and it will tell you, if you have low, moderate, or high cognitive reserve. And what I'm going to do is email out one of the questionnaires to everybody at the end of the talk today. There's also some really exciting science going on that is showing that lifestyle choices can have an impact on the progression of mild cognitive impairment and early dementia due to Alzheimer's. So there's more studies coming. The initial study was done by Dean Ornish and his colleagues. It was a very small study, but with very promising results. And so I can also email that to everybody. A couple of other important terms are neurogenesis and neuroplasticity. I think probably people are more familiar with neuroplasticity because that's, again, one of the neuroscience terms that's like a hot term right now. And that refers to your brain's ability to make new connections and rewire. So if you think about a computer that has many, many connections, you are more likely than, again, if you've got an injury or an illness, those connections are going to help with continued function. What we used to believe was that your brain could not generate new cells. However, research has now indicated that each day our brain generates new cells in one of the areas of your brain responsible for memory, which is your hippocampus. So that's really important because we all know that dementia affects memory. And if we can help maintain those new cells, we can prolong our memory function, right? There are things that you can do to basically nurture those cells, and there are other things I tell people where you can basically stomp them out. And a lot of our current lifestyle is unfortunately not promoting neurogenesis, but we are stomping out the new cells. And so we're going to talk about what we can do to prevent that. All right, so there are 6 pillars of brain health: sleep, socializing, stress management, physical activity, new learning, and nutrition. Now, for most of us, we can check off a couple of these boxes, right? If we're still working, we're probably socializing. For some people, they love to be physically active, so they don't have to worry about that. But they might be finding that their sleep and their stress management are areas in need. And I think the most important piece to remember is that all 6 of these are very important. So we can't negate one because, like, ugh, I don't really want to, I don't enjoy physical activity. Or, you know what, my life is just stressful and that's just the way it is. We really need to take time to figure out how we can address each of these 6 pillars in our daily lives. All right, so as Hippocrates said, let food be thy medicine shall be thy food. And we are learning more and more about just how important that is. So you want to keep your diet consisting of natural, unprocessed foods as much as possible. The Mind diet, which is a combination of the Mediterranean and DASH diet, was developed by Dr. Martha Claire Morris out of Chicago. And it actually stands for Mediterranean DASH Intervention for Neurodegenerative Delay. Thankfully, she shortened it to Mind diet because that is much easier for us to remember. So the way that the Mind diet differs a little bit from the Mediterranean DASH diet is that she includes specific servings for each type of recommended food group. There are tons of recipes on Pinterest and online. There are books that can help with menu planning. So you can find recipes that are easy and within your, your taste buds so that you can follow that Mind diet. The Mind diet is one of the areas in the study where people made changes to their nutritional plan, and they really felt like that helped your brain. If you think about your brain like a sports car, because it actually is like one of the most important organs in our body, right? You wouldn't fuel a sports car with the worst gasoline. Yet the way that we eat sometimes, we are fueling our brains and our bodies basically with junk. And so we want to make that change. There's also what's called the brain-gut connection, which is basically, they've identified that our guts contain the second largest number of neurons as compared to your brain. Kind of makes sense, right? When we get nervous, our stomach bothers us. So there is a connection there. They're understanding more and more about how what we eat affects our brain because of the digestion and the inflammation that it causes. So if you are eating something that is upsetting your stomach, it is likely creating some level of upsetment in your brain, and that may be experienced through brain fog, where you just feel like I'm not so clear today, or I'm not quite sure why I'm having more memory difficulties, or why it's taking me longer to make decisions, just feel slower. That could be your brain-gut connection working. It's also interesting to know that our brains use 20% of the calories that we consume. So, when you think about the brain as one organ in your body, not so big, right? But it's using 20% of everything that we ingest. So we want to really think about how it is we are fueling our brain for the most efficient processing. Sleep. So very often, especially as we get a little bit older, for women experiencing menopause, sleep is almost like one of those things that you just wish you could get a handle on again. Sleep apnea is also more common as we age, but we really need to get 7 to 9 hours, because our brain, while we're sleeping, has a couple of really important functions. One is we are consolidating memory from the day. And the second is that it is cleaning out whatever toxins are there through the lymphatic system. So if we're not sleeping, we're not allowing our brain to get rid of the toxins. We all know that it's the toxins that are helping to increase the diagnosis of Alzheimer's. And so everything gets connected. If you are recognizing that you are really having a hard time sleeping, one of the first things to start to do is create a sleep hygiene program. And, that would include turning off your devices 60 to 90 minutes prior to going to sleep, going to bed at the same time, keeping your bedroom clear of clutter and keeping your bedroom cool and dark. Avoid eating and drinking 2 to 3 hours before bedtime. Limiting alcohol and caffeine intake. And trying to get out early in the morning. I mean, we live in South Florida, so it's easy to get natural sunshine to restore melatonin levels. So if you get out within an hour to an hour and a half of sunrise, your body will get natural restoration of melatonin. And I'm sure that people are very familiar with taking melatonin at night to help them sleep. But again, anything that we can do naturally, our body responds better to the natural source than it will to the supplements. Okay, the next pillar is stress management. So again, right, we've probably all experienced periods of extended stress in our lives and we feel like, wow, like my memory is just not as good. So there's a couple of reasons for that. One could be that we're internally distracted by whatever it is that's stressing us. And so we're just not paying attention as much. If we don't pay attention as well, we're not going to process information as well, and we're also not going to be able to remember them. The other thing, though, is that studies have shown that the hippocampus can actually shrink during periods of extended stress. So for anybody who's been diagnosed with PTSD, their hippocampus is smaller. Again, though, the good news is that if you reduce your stress, your hippocampus can grow. So it's not a lost cause. And I think that's the most important piece. Like our brains, I tell everybody that I treat, especially if they've come in after an injury, is our brains are built to heal, just like the rest of our body. We just want to put it in an environment that promotes healing and does not promote the continued stress or, nutritional issues, because we can't expect our brain to do better unless we're giving it what it needs. So there are some stress management strategies that work in the moment. One of them is the rainbow strategy. So if you feel yourself, you're in a situation and you're just getting overwhelmed, you think about the colors of the rainbow and identify something in the environment that matches that color, right? Basically, it's a way of distracting your brain away from whatever it is that's stressing you out. For some activities that have been shown to promote stress reduction, things like yoga, Tai Chi, doing breath work, physical activities, such as, it has to be something that you enjoy doing though, okay? Gratitude journals are great because they help change your mindset. Sometimes we get stressed by a situation because we're only seeing it from the same perspective over and over and over again. And so we are actually training our brain to look for the negative. We want to train our brain to look for the positive and find something good in every situation. And that's where the gratitude journals come in. So socialization and play. As adults, sometimes we forget how to play. Life is very busy. We have a lot of responsibilities. But as George Bernard Shaw said, we do not stop playing because we grow old. We grow old because we stop playing. We need to keep fun in our lives. And if we can have that fun with other people, you're checking 2 boxes. So maintaining strong social connections is important for mental, emotional, and cognitive health. Every conversation that you have requires brain activation. As a speech pathologist, there's everything from being able to pay attention, maintaining eye contact, reading nonverbal language, identifying what words you're going to use, put those words into order, speak them in the tone that you want them to come out in. Then as the listener, you've got to comprehend, think about what your response is going to be. What did they mean by that question? Identify all the words that are being used. Identify, again, the inflection and the body language. So you keep your brain very active when you're in conversation. one of the things that we saw during COVID, when they limited social interaction, people aged very quickly. And so we want to keep ourselves as interactive as possible, whether it's joining a group, meeting people for a walk, starting a new hobby. And when we get to new learning, there's ways that you can combine all of these pillars so that you don't feel like, okay, well, I checked pillar 1 today, but I still have the other 5 to do. Obviously, because life is busy, we want to combine as many of the pillars as we can. Oxytocin, which is also called the love hormone, has been shown to reduce cortisol levels, which is our stress hormone. And cortisol becomes detrimental when it is in our system for a prolonged period of time. So it can be okay to get us through a shorter period of stress, but over time, cortisol lowers our immune system, and it will increase blood pressure. It will increase feelings of depression. And so we want to do whatever we can to keep those levels of cortisol down. Oxytocin has been shown to increase heart health, boosts immunity, decreases depression, reduces fatigue, and it actually will increase neurogenesis, which again is the rebirth of cells. Okay, so during physical activity, I think the key component of physical activity is that it must be something that you enjoy. So what you're trying to do is, your goal is 150 minutes per week of moderate level intensity, which is basically, if you use the exertion scale when you're exercising, it's between a 4 and a 6, where you're able to carry on a conversation. You're not out of breath, but you're starting to work a little bit. During physical activity, brain-derived neurotrophic factor is responsible for neuroplasticity, but it also promotes neurogenesis. That gets increased when we're exercising or doing any level of doing physical activity. I try not to call it exercise because sometimes that's a turn off to people. So your physical activity could be gardening, it could be paddleboarding, it can be dancing. It does not require that you go to the gym. For those people who like to go to the gym, that's fine. You can, do your 150 minutes in the gym. I would try again, if you can get out in the morning, to, do some exercise outside within that hour and a half of sunrise. So you're restoring your melatonin, can help your sleep. Again, you'll be checking 2 boxes. It's also important to do both a combination of aerobic and resistance training, because as we age, our muscle density reduces, and that can, again, increase susceptible to a fall. You can also get to a 4-6, between a 4 and a 6 on the exertion scale, doing weight training. Okay, and lifelong learning. So again, we want to promote neuroplasticity and making new connections. Lifelong learning creates new connections. Sometimes we may find that we get into a comfort zone, and new learning may just feel like it's stressful, it's too challenging. I've been there, done that, put my time in, and I just kind of want to hang out where I am. But your brain really does benefit from learning new information. There are studies showing that learning an instrument is really effective for increasing neuroplasticity, because music is a full brain activity. It stimulates both the right and the left hemispheres. So if anybody has, thought about starting to play an instrument, now would be a good time. If you played an instrument in the past and want to get back to it, that's great too. Also, learning a new language is really stimulating for neuroplasticity. But you can also take up a new hobby. You can, take a class. There's all sorts of activities that will stimulate neuroplasticity. Okay, so the most important thing, now that you understand what the 6 pillars are, is to think about what's your plan going to be. Because without a plan, most of the time, change doesn't happen. So I always say to people, don't think about trying to do all 6 areas at once. Identify either the area that you think will be the easiest to make the change, or the area that you believe is going to have the biggest impact, because that's what you're going to be motivated to continue to do. And like I said earlier, you want to combine areas whenever possible. So for a lot of us, I'm going to guess that the nutrition can be the most challenging. We all have busy schedules. Trying to do the meal prep can be challenging. It's much easier, again, if you find a 7-week plan that follows the MIND diet and you go by that menu, because it takes some of the decision making away for you. If you create, you say one day during the weekend, I'm going to do meal prep so I can prep for the day and prep for my week, you're more likely going to follow through with that. If it's left to like, it's 6:30 when I get home, I'm tired, I don't have time to put things together, I don't know what I'm going to cook, we have a tendency to fall back on what we've already been doing. You also want to identify potential challenges that may arise. So what do I think is likely going to interfere, or why haven't I been doing that already? And then be proactive. Start to think about solutions for change. I've encouraged people sometimes, sorry, if they live on their own, get together with a couple of friends and do some meal prep and share the food. Number one, you get to socialize while you're doing the meal prep. And number two, you've split the task between 2 or 3 of you, so it doesn't feel so overwhelming. Then you're going to actually schedule your plan and note any modifications that may need to be accounted for. So I tried it this week, this worked, this didn't. And most importantly, be patient with yourself. Establishing new habits and routines take time, but the payoff is worth it, because you will have a stronger brain and you will feel better each day about what you're doing. Okay. Any questions?
Susan said in her experience, it seems the older we get, the less we want to socialize. So you gave a few examples of ways to socialize. Any other good suggestions?
I think the key to that is understanding why are you feeling less comfortable socializing? Because it could be related to, one of the things that happens as we age is our speed of processing slows down. And so without recognizing it, we may feel uncomfortable in situations with multiple people because the conversation goes much faster. And our brain sort of has this natural ability to protect us. And so we just go, yeah, I'm not going to do that anymore. But try and figure out why. Is it related to trying to get out the door feels more stressful, where maybe you need to create more of a routine so that it's less demanding.
And one of the things Encore always suggests is volunteer. Volunteer.
Absolutely.
Volunteering is a great way to socialize, as well as giving you a sense of purpose and more fulfillment, and all of those ways actually I think would definitely be contributors to brain health.
And it would also, volunteering, when you're helping people, you also get the oxytocin release, which is very important, which makes you, you feel good, so you come back.
Right, right, exactly. And if you do it early in the morning, you get the sunshine too.
That's right.
Yanni had a lot to say in the chat. Yanni, do you want to say something?
Oh, yeah, I'm fascinated. Thank you so much for bringing this topic. Doreen, you hit it right on the nail. I see a sleep specialist. When you mentioned the word sleep hygiene, oh my God, Yanni. And you went down the list. I'm like, yep, I've heard this before.
Mhm.
Um, but I wanted to mention something else regarding cognitive. I noticed the change when I first, right after COVID, when I first had my first COVID, my brain was like, oh my God. It's like I couldn't concentrate. I couldn't memorize. I couldn't, um, like in the ninth cloud, it was like
Mhm.
it felt horrible. So what did I do? Because I always seek answers. I went and saw a neuropsychologist at the University of Miami, and
Okay.
they did a full-blown battery of tests to test my cognitive function. And they gave me recommendations. Um, and they said your brain is normal for your age, but you have to break down hard, challenging tasks. You cannot sit in front of a computer and go, 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 go. No, you have to divide it into chunks. And rest, take a walk, and come back to the task. That's one of the things that I remember from the chart that you share with us of all the things that impact the brain, the two S's for me, sleep
Sleep and stress
and
management.
stress management. I mean, I am recovering from having worked 13 months in a intense, toxic work environment, not just the environment, the boss. And I was in denial about the toll that that takes on your brain and your body. I've been away for a month and all these things are coming up. It's like, what the heck is going on? It's like my body is like I'm trying to, when you're trying to detox and rebuild your body to go out there again, but it's like a horse that is being restrained back. It's like all these things popping up. I'm like, what? And then the more I do my homework and the more I sitting in workshops, I'm like, oh my God, I did this to myself because I thought I could stick it out, until I find a better job. Stick it out, Yanni. Well,
Any recommendations, Doreen, for being in those type of situations?
So I think one of them comes down to recognizing that, I think people always say it's just in your head. And my response to that is, well, yes, it is, because it's your brain that's affected and your brain is in your head. But we have a tendency to think that a lot of it is more like an emotional response to things. And we need to come away from that because, when we have any kind of cognitive difficulty, right, it's known as the unseen injury because you can't see it. Nobody's walking around with a bandage on your head, or you don't have a broken leg or a broken arm. There's no cast. So we immediately think, well, if we can't see it, I must be exaggerating it to some degree. And that's not the case. If you really are introspective and you recognize that I have done everything that I can. And I've been in situations like that too, where, even though I'm in healthcare, there can be toxic healthcare situations as well. And try and make change, try and make suggestions. I always say, if I feel like I've gone up against the wall 4 or 5 times and I can't move the wall, then I need to make the change. and I need to start actively then looking for other employment. Sometimes we can make changes within ourselves because we can learn how to respond. But if we are truly in a toxic environment, as much as we're doing on our own, we're not going to change the environment. So we might be able to, I might be able to say, I can control my reaction to that person. At the end of the day, I don't feel as bad as I did a month ago, because now I've learned how to kind of take some of the sting out of it. But if it doesn't matter what I do, if they keep coming back harder, then that's a situation where you need to make the move. It's the same thing with personal relationships. If sometimes learning how to control your response is just not enough. If you're really in a toxic relationship with somebody, ultimately the answer is to get out of the toxic relationship.
Great advice. Norman actually wants to know, of the 6 pillars, which do you think are the most important?
That's the tricky question. They're all important. So like I have people who will, they're really physically active, they're social, they're doing their new learning, and they're drinking several times a week. So, when we talk about that neurogenesis, are you nurturing those new cells or are you stomping on them? Well, part of the time you're nurturing them and part of the time you're stomping on them. Doesn't matter if you nurtured them and then stomped on them. So, I think to say that, again, prioritize for yourself, either what you think you can do to make the change first, because a lot of us like to see that, hey, I'm successful, I'm gaining momentum here. Just like Yanni said, if you're not doing any of the 6, to say, here, do all 6 of them at the same time, it's going to be overwhelming. That's not going to work. You have to choose either, what do I think I'm doing that's the most detrimental, that would make the biggest change, and so I want to start there. Or if I want to start small with something I'm doing 50% of the time and increase that so I can build on my success, I would say that's the way to do. But you can't really say, if somebody's doing 5 of them, but they're not sleeping, you're still hurting your brain.
Right. Norman, does that satisfy you? Do you have any more questions about it?
Yeah, I mean, that's fine. The other question I had in the chat was about the resistance training. I've heard about that before, and I think that's probably something I would need to add to my routine. Is there anything specific that you would recommend to get started with that?
No, I mean, I think, I would definitely make sure with your doctor that you're okay to start strength training. And then if there's I don't know, if you go to a gym, there might be a trainer there, that could get you started. Do you generally go to a gym or do you work out on your own?
I work out on my own, so I don't really have
okay.
a trainer or anything like that.
Then you know what? There's plenty of like beginner YouTube type exercises, as long as you get your doctor's permission and you don't have any, like I had fractured an elbow a couple of years ago, so I have some limitations on what I can do. But I just work around it, knowing what those limitations are.
One other question comes to mind. I would imagine that a lot of us know this stuff already. I mean, this is not anything brand new that we haven't heard before, and yet so many people struggle with it anyway. So I'm kind of curious as to why, even though we know about things, we still resist doing them anyway.
Some of it's habit, right? If we've been doing something for 20 or 30 years, I always say to people, our brain is not a light switch. It's not, you're not going to break that old habit. So, the wiring theory is that neurons that fire together wire together. And the more they fire together, the stronger those connections are. So we actually have to break those old connections and then create new ones. And unless we're making a conscious effort to do that, and have a system in place, it's hard. You know, it's not just going to be second nature. And that's where that health belief model comes in. For me, it's really important. I have spent 35 years working with people who had changes in their cognitive ability, and it impacts their life literally in an instant. So if I'm not motivated to do it, like nobody would be, but I see it every day. So it's reinforced to me how important it is. For other people, you know, by the time the disease process starts for dementia, it's been happening in your body for 20 to 30 years. It's not a new thing. And so when you think about, you know, hey, I have the ability, even when I'm 60, to potentially push this off, let me get started. You know, and the idea behind making, you know, identifying the 6 pillars and trying to keep it a little simpler. I was in a networking meeting this morning, and people are talking about cold plunge and infrared sauna and all these, you know, $400 a month of supplements. It's like, that's not realistic for the average person. The average person can't afford to go to an infrared sauna twice a week, or potentially, you know, do $400 a month in supplements. Meanwhile, they're not doing other things. Like, I know this person drinks a ton of tequila. I'm like, you can sauna all you want, but your tequila is killing your brain cells. And he vapes. So, you know, like sometimes too, people will excuse away certain behaviors that are detrimental because they say, well, I'm doing this. But it's important that you really take an honest look at everything that we're doing and say, what can I change and how can I change it? So I'm not going to change it overnight. What's my gradual process? And if you want accountability buddies, we're here. You know, if anybody decides, hey, you know what, I want to start to do this, but I want to do it with somebody, let me know, and I will be your accountability partner.
Great
you.
advice. Great advice. And you know, as you were talking, I keep thinking about getting back to the gym. It's that type of thing. Is like once you go the first time and you start to get the endorphins flowing, you're like, gee, why did I wait so long? And so, and like you said, we don't see that with the brain, but it's that same sense of just take the first step. And all of a sudden you'll get into the habit because you'll realize it is beneficial. And Susan wants to know, how do the brain disorders like ADHD and epilepsy fit in the 6 pillars?
So the 6 pillars are relevant to everyone. I work with a lot of people diagnosed with ADHD, and they are given the same brain health information. ADHD is certainly aggravated by diet, you know, and people with ADHD have a tendency to make very quick decisions. So their diets are generally not as great as somebody else. They have difficulty with time management and planning. So for them to do meal planning and meal prep, that's not something that they do on their own, but it's very important. You know, the same thing with physical activity. There's no brain that does not benefit from brain health. And epilepsy is another, you know, stress management is huge for people with epilepsy. Nutrition is also, they have done studies that the ketogenic diet for epilepsy has been effective for some people. So it all, you know, if you are sleep deprived, you are lowering your seizure threshold.
Interesting. And what are your thoughts on medical marijuana? Susan wants to know.
I wax and wane on that because having, I have definitely worked with people who benefited from medical marijuana for their pain. I have seen it help people with their anxiety. But I thought that medical marijuana was going to be more prescribed. It's a little bit like the wild, wild west. And so I think just be very careful, because there's also studies coming out now about, you know, they were saying that marijuana is not addicting, which didn't make a whole lot of sense, but that's what they were saying. And now they're saying that it is, and there is withdrawal. So I would just be very comfortable with your provider and talk about what the plan is. And, you know, is it a temporary thing? Is it a permanent? I've had people who do the gummies. The gummies, there is no dosing. So for anybody who takes a gummy to help them sleep and they take the full gummy the first time, they're like, I was totally knocked out for like 14 hours. I can only take a half or a quarter. So it makes me a little nervous.
I have a question about technology. How does technology affect our brains? We see it especially with the younger generations that are so addicted to it. How does that affect the brain?
So definitely getting tied to your device is an issue, especially for younger people. We're seeing that they're not developing interpersonal communication skills. We are seeing that they are not developing some of the problem-solving abilities, the ability to compromise, and there's definitely that immediate gratification issue. So the ability to wait is it's almost like lost on the younger generations. But I think the biggest one is the interpersonal communication that's getting lost. And now more and more schools are actually starting to limit cell phone use in schools. And they're finding that the students are actually looking at one another and interacting, and in a very short period of time.
Doreen, if I could ask a question. Are you familiar with the work of Dr. Gene Cohen?
No.
Okay, well, Dr. Gene Cohen, and he's now deceased, but he was the director of the Center on Aging, Health, and Humanities at George Washington University, the founding director of the Washington Center on Aging, but more importantly for me, he wrote a book about awakening creativity in the later part of life. He did a lot of wonderful work demonstrating that older people have the ability to be creative in way late in life, as long as they exercised those brain cells by taking on some new activity, learning a new skill, painting, and various other exercises. His point was that just because people get older does not mean that they do not retain the ability to be creative, no matter how old they get, as long as they do the work, so to speak, of exercising those brain cells. And I think of this often when I see people, and I talk with people who spend an awful lot of time watching television or playing cards as activities that fill time, but they're not exercising the brain cells because they're repeating known skills, and things TV just washes across your eyes. It doesn't make your brain cells work.
Right, so
I really think we need to do more work letting people know that they have that ability to be creative. Where does that
it sounds
fit
like
in with the 6 pillars?
what he was talking about, right, is neuroplasticity. So yes, if by stimulating your brain, right, you're actually helping your brain to grow. It doesn't matter how old you are, unless your brain, like we talked about before, if you're already showing those disease processes. But the research is now showing that if you do an intensive lifestyle inventory and make change, there is the potential that you can restore some of those lost skills. And that's huge because we don't have any medicine that can do that. And so like I always say, the 6 pillars it's not rocket science. It's what life used to be for people, right? The science behind them figuring this all out, that's the rocket science. But what we have to do is pretty basic. And so I think if we make it easier for people to implement, and again, you could, there's the 6 pillars, and then there's all the other things. Brain health is becoming a billion-dollar industry, with the supplements and all these other kinds of treatments. And what I say is that's great for those people that can afford that. But a supplement is meant to supplement. It's not meant to be the primary part of your diet. And again, people are thinking like, well, I don't have to worry about doing that because I can just take the supplement. No, your body metabolizes food. Chewing actually helps promote neurogenesis. Taking the pill does not promote the neurogenesis. If your body is in need of something, I am wholeheartedly saying, yes, give it to it. But don't think I can take 15 supplements, eat the way that I want, not sleep, not manage my stress, and that my brain is going to be okay.
I think it's very, I think it's very hopeful if you believe that you have the ability to create new things in your life, no matter how old you are. But I think, quite frankly, my observation is most people are too lazy. They're lazy.
Well,
They don't want to
technology,
make the effort.
technology.
They don't want to make the effort to work at something, so they will take a pill.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that will solve everything. And I don't know how we got to this point. It seems to me an insidious marketing to people that all their problems can be solved by some medical procedure, some pill, and so forth. And I don't know how we counteract that in our society. Do you have a view about what can be done?
I think just providing education, because the reality is there is not a cure for Alzheimer's, but the study by Dean Ornish is showing that, wait a minute, maybe we have more control over this than we thought we did. I mean, he does do some supplements, but the primary areas that were addressed in the study were lifestyle changes. So things like being active and nutrition and socializing and new learning. I think it's just about providing the education to people and making it feel like it's doable. Because like if I said to somebody, here, you have to do all 6 of these things starting tomorrow, they're going to be like, lady, go away. Like, there's no way I can't do that. But if you work with people and you say, okay, where do you want to start? And over the next 6 months, we're going to start to touch on each of these pillars. And as people start to feel better, they do more. And so you want to it's getting that hook initially so that people can see and feel the difference, and then they'll keep going.
You're giving me an idea for something that I want to create. As Christine knows, I created Encore Palm Beach County 10 years ago when I was 75. I'm now 85 and living in an assisted living community. And I am working here to create new programs with staff and residents. I just feel that people have been brainwashed that they don't have the ability to do new things. So even listening to you about the 6 pillars and the approach to it, I can see that happening in a systematic, supportive way right where I live.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always looking for, okay, what can we create here? And one of the staff, we have a staff of people who are responsible for engaging residents in various activities. And I told her that one of the mottos I try to live with is bloom where you're planted. In other words, wherever you are, seek to make a contribution. It doesn't have to be a big deal thing. Okay. So the other day I suggested, why don't we all go to a planetarium and see the night skies, the constellation? And these are all people in their 70s, 80s, and 90s. And everybody was so excited about doing that. So there's always something that you can do to create new experiences, new learning, and use those brain cells. Is it possible by adopting that philosophy to stave off things like Alzheimer's?
There's studies that are shown, actually in the 80s, one of the first studies, it was called the Nun study. And nuns had donated their brains to science. They showed no active signs of Alzheimer's. And when their brains were dissected, they found advanced stages of Alzheimer's. And what that's where the interest in cognitive reserve came about. And the doctor in Chicago who created the Mind Diet has found the same things, that there are people that upon their death, when their autopsies are done, their brains look very diseased, yet they did not show any day-to-day change in their functioning. And so if you can continue, and the 6 pillars are meant to increase your cognitive reserve, if you can continue to increase your cognitive reserve, we don't know, for sure that you're going to be able to avoid it, but you're certainly increasing your chances.
Well, one thing I am going to do is to share this program with the staff at my community.
Yeah, and if they have any questions, have them reach out to me.
Okie doke.
Maybe Doreen can do a presentation with you. Sure, she'd be happy to share that as well. Well, we've pretty much reached our time. Are there any other questions or comments?
Well, I just wanted to, like, when Doreen shared her age, I'm like, I want her diet. But then when Rosemary share her age, I'm like, I'm going to her. It's like, what's the recipe here for preserving yourself so well? Share that too.
It's the 6 pillars. It's not just one thing. It's learning to live life in a balanced way.
And I've always personally believed in balance. And before I came to this session, I had my exercise class, which I do 5 days a week here, and I swim 3 days a week, and I am the only one ever in the pool.
Good for you, though, Rosemary. You're a leader. So
Yeah.
let people, you show them the way, and hopefully they'll catch on.
Been doing my whole life, Doreen.
And I think that's a big part of it, is just staying engaged in every way, shape, and form, and staying active. And
Yeah, it's not complicated. It's not complicated, folks.
Yep, exactly. And we don't send out the recording in the email, but you will find it in about a week or so on our YouTube channel. And so look for that on Encore PBC Encore PBC YouTube channel. Couldn't get it out. I'm having a couple of brain shorts the last few days myself. But interesting where you talked about the gut-brain connection. Having some gut issues. I'm concerned every time I have a brain fog. I'm concerned about exactly that. Like, okay, what did I eat? What's bringing this on? So there definitely is something there. And I think that's another part, is recognizing, as you mentioned earlier, recognizing when we do have those moments, what is it that we did that might have created that or brought that on? So we can make the shifts based according to the pillars. So great information, Doreen. Thank you so much for sharing with us.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
having me.
Thank you very much. And thank you everyone for joining us, and look for the YouTube video to be up in about a week or two. And again, it's the season. Happy holiday to everyone, whatever you're celebrating. Enjoy.